SOW Video, and I'm Theodore Ross, Editor-in-Chief of the Food and Environment Reporting Network, or FERN. I'm joined today by FERN Senior Editor Ted Genoways. Hey, Ted, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here too, because I'm excited to talk about the new project of yours that we just put out on ReapSo. And it's an interesting one because it's not just a podcast, a full episode of audio done in partnership with Reveal, but it's also a full length feature text story from Mother Jones, which is an unusual and new thing for us to be doing. I'm very pleased and proud of it. Now, the story itself is a very timely one. It's about the Trump administration's actions against immigrants. It's about the meatpacking industry, and it's about TikTok, which is you couldn't get much more contemporary than that. So, Ted, tell me why this story?
Well, I mean, the kind of deep background on why this story or why me for this story is that I've spent the last 15 years covering the meatpacking industry in various ways, and most of that work has focused on the labor side of things and on the industry's dependence on immigrant labor. And in particular, I've been interested in this changeover that has occurred in the industry from undocumented labor, which is the perception that I think a lot of people still have of the industry, that that's how it runs. But in fact, it's experienced a changeover to refugee and asylum seekers as the primary base for their employees, and so what we can see in the kind of microcosm of the meatpacking industry is each successive wave of migrants who are coming to this country and entering under humanitarian visas. So it's a kind of glimpse of our patchwork immigration system and how it has been increasingly strained and stretched to try to accommodate the moment. It's also a glimpse of what's going on in the world at any time, where the crises are most acute. And so this particular story was of interest to me because there was a recent and really significant change in the workforce at the JBS plant, a beef packing plant in Greeley, Colorado, that very quickly saw a change from almost no, maybe in fact zero Haitian workers at that plant to what the union estimates to be about 1,200 workers at that plant, which would be approaching half the workforce at that single plant. And so the obvious question that the union had and that people like me are interested in is, how did that happen? And as you say, it turns out that it was a kind of fluke where there was this TikToker who is himself Haitian and was hoping to recruit people to Greeley because he's an Uber driver and had dreams of starting a small store where he could sell goods to his fellow Haitians, and was trying to get people to move to town. And he was looking for places that they could work, where they could live. And when he stumbled into a conversation with a mid-level manager, an HR manager at JBS, they gave him a lot of information that he put on TikTok, and through the weirdness of the internet and an influencer who shared his video, the thing went viral. And what had originally been an expectation that they would have 50 or 60 jobs, in fact turned out, as I said, to be more than 1,000. That created this tremendous stress on the whole system in terms of the hiring and the amount of housing available, and led to some really bad living conditions for the workers who were coming in. But it also appears that JBS recognized this as a kind of opportunity, with workers who were non-English speakers, who were not well connected to the union, and the union and an EEOC complaint allege that once they had this large group of workers with those kind of loose ties to the union and locally, that the speed of the work and the intensity of the work, the amount of work that these Haitian migrants were expected to do, was considerably more than was expected of the people on the daytime shift who were more established. So the union alleges that this is human trafficking, that this is people being brought in under false circumstances and then exposed to unfair, dangerous working conditions and squalid living conditions. And then, as you said, the brutal kind of final irony in all of this is that just as they filed a complaint with the Department of Labor and the National Labor Relations Board and OSHA and just everyone they could think of, that Trump is elected and in part having run on vows of deporting people like these Haitian migrants, and in the time that he's been in office, in that brief time, he has removed people from the board of the National Labor Relations Board and other entities that they have complained to EEOC, so that they no longer have a working quorum. These investigations are dead in the water. And he's rescinded their humanitarian visas, which means that they now all have an order to be out of the country by August 3rd. And so instead of offering protection and assistance for people who found themselves in this dire circumstance, instead the government has halted all investigation and has ordered the people who say that they were wronged to leave the country. And I think, important to remember as a final note that these are all people who entered the country legally and who, as part of that process, had to show that their lives were in imminent danger in Haiti. And so when Trump says we're just going to send them back and their country will accept them, first of all, there's not really a functioning government in Haiti, but the migrants that I talked to said, look, if they put us on a plane, zip tie us and put us on a plane and fly us to Port-au-Prince, we won't make it off the runway, we won't make it out of the airport, that there will be people waiting there for us to kill everyone as they come off the plane. And so the ironies are just heaped upon each other, it seems to me, in this case, and it's, as I said at the beginning, it's just a kind of microcosm of all of the failures and of the immigration system, and shows the desperate need for reform that we've been putting off really for decades at this point.
Yeah, one of the things that's striking about this story, which is obviously both tragic and frustrating and hard to read, is there's a sort of comedy of errors aspect to it. I mean, we have this Uber driver and he bumps into an HR representative who's also himself a migrant. And the TikTok video that he puts together, this is the thing that sort of blows my mind. It's amplified by a social media influencer in Creole, Haitian Creole, who goes, when we looked into it, or when you looked into it, sometimes he called himself Jean-Jean Biden, sometimes Jean-Jean Kamala Harris. I suspect he's not using either of those nicknames now after the election. But these are not. This is the gang that couldn't quite shoot straight, frankly. And that kind of leads me to my next question, and I'm curious to hear how you answer it, because it could just be as simple as I don't speak Creole. But what was the biggest obstacle for you to the reporting of this story?
Well, certainly, there are those sort of initial difficulties of anytime you're reporting on the meatpacking industry. That I mean, one of the craziest things about the TikTok video is that the person who made it, whose name is Mackinson Remy, he had no idea that JBS was the largest meat producer in the world, that they have this kind of legendary security apparatus to keep people from having any visibility. He just drove accidentally into their exit when people were leaving the plant and managed to get in there and start driving around filming.
Do you believe that, by the way? I mean, is Colorado not an ag-gag state? How did he get in?
It's not an ag state, although there's been attempts to outlaw shooting video inside the plant. But I can tell you that when I was there with Marianne Andre, who did the audio and photography for this story, and is my wife, and we were there together, that just as we like sat on the easement on the shoulder of the highway where it is perfectly legal to be, that anytime we were there, it would be about 30 seconds before there was a security guard from the plant that was out there trying to shoo us away and threatening to call the authorities and whatever else. And so it is, I mean, it's a weird thing that, but, you know, Mackinson himself says this is what happened. It's what the company says happened. But consequently, his TikTok video features a bunch of raw footage of him just kind of driving around in the interior of the plant, which is like, it's a view that only employees get. So that's strange enough. So that, but that kind of obstacle, like trying to report on a company that won't talk to you really. I mean, they have a PR person whose job it is to answer questions by email, but there's no chance for an interview or a conversation with anybody, and they have continued to employ the HR manager who's facing these allegations, and so he won't talk. So there are those basic obstacles, but then yes, I mean, a lot of what the meatpacking industry does as a kind of habit is hire people from different backgrounds with different languages and cultural differences as a way of making it difficult for the workforce to unionize and organize. And so, you know, the union says that there are somewhere close to 60 languages being spoken in the plant at any given time. And so just the kind of challenge of any time you want to try to report on a meatpacking workforce, you're facing a major language problem, a sort of cultural problem. In this case, the thing that was really key, two things, were that Kim Cordova, who's the president of the Local 7, of the United Food and Commercial Workers, the union that represents this plant, she is probably the most vocal president of any of the locals in the entire country. And she's very willing to speak to people like me and to share what information she has. She's the person who led the investigation into this human trafficking allegation and came away of the opinion that is what's going on, and she was more than happy to share information with me. The other thing is that one of the people who was hired by JBS was a man named Ted Genoways, who is fluent in multiple languages. And so he was able for me to serve as an interpreter. And the thing that's remarkable about Chelly is that not only is his English incredibly good, and he taught himself English by watching YouTube videos and then working in a call center in Haiti. So he spent all day long having conversations in English. So his English is really incredibly good. But Chelly is also, he has that kind of rare skill of being able to, on the fly, interpret people's comments and with great precision. I mean, he's like a literary translator that somehow he's always capturing the mood. And even when we had his interpretation checked then by somebody who did, you know, a kind of precise translation for us, both for the reveal piece and for Mother Jones, the thing that the translator said was just, this is an incredibly good job. And so as a reporter, it was possible in the moment to react to things as if I was getting, you know, this person speaking to me directly in English. So those circumstances were really fortunate, and also fortunate that, you know, that the union had enough trust from the workers, that there were a number of workers that were willing to come and talk to me, and so I could really get perspectives from them on multiple parts of this story. And the last piece, Mackinson, for whatever reason, he'd been really cagey about talking to anyone else. He had offered a few comments here and there to the Wall Street Journal and to some local media, but mostly what he had said was, I didn't do anything wrong, I have a clear conscience, that sort of thing. I don't know why, but Mackinson, with me, we spent days together. And, the people who were allegedly trafficked were trafficked into a place called the Rainbow Motel, a sort of dingy little motor lodge on the highway next to the plant. Mackinson met with me at the Rainbow Motel, and we looked at the room together, and our first interview was in that room. And he took me to his shop, and he showed me around. And so we saw many of the places that people had talked about. I saw them firsthand with the person who brought them into those spaces. So, in many ways, things really lined up with this story. There are hurdles in any reporting project, but this one, in a lot of ways, worked out unexpectedly well.
Yeah, one of the things that sticks with me when you talk about Ticelli is that, my grandfather is also a refugee to this country from Germany in 1936, and he always told me that he learned English by reading the dictionary at night. It's just part of that immigrant story, and these are the people that contributed this country, and these are the sacrifices that they make, and the abilities that they have, and it's just very powerful.
Well, and that's, if I can be permitted a moment of editorializing, I have to say, Chelly is one of these people that you meet and you're like, there's something really special about this individual. Like he radiates a sense of intelligence and kind of leadership, and there's a really calm kind of wisdom about the guy. He's seeing things in a kind of totality that not very many people see. And you meet him and you're like, this is somebody who we absolutely want in this country. He wants to be here. He wants to be a part of this society and contributing to this society. This is a win for the United States. And the idea that somebody like him is being specifically targeted for deportation by this administration, it just, to me, shows the failures of the system. It shows that things are not working right when you have somebody who is this smart, this ambitious, this kind of civic-minded, and you say, no, we don't want somebody like that here.
All right, so I have one last question. What's the takeaway from this story? What should we be learning from it?
Well, I guess, it's related to what I was just saying. The question the overt questions that I pose in the Mother Jones story is, what obligations do we have to people who we welcomed into this country on humanitarian grounds? In the case of everyone in this story, we swabbed their cheek to take a DNA sample. We fingerprinted them. We collected biometric data so that we
meaning the federal government.
The federal government, the American people, have collected all of this data in order to do a thorough background check. And as part of that process, also investigated to see if these people were in fact in danger. Chelly is a perfect example. He was shot. He was shot through the chest, and the doctors told him there's no reason you should have survived. But he's, when he says, I can't go back, there will be people who try to kill me, it's remarkable that the guy is alive in the first place. And so when we start talking about deporting 1 million people or more than 1 million people who have this status, it should be remembered that what we're talking about is sending more than 1 million people into a situation where their lives are at risk. So are we willing to assume the responsibility for all of the deaths that occur for people who we send back? And then the other question is, what are we going to do without the people who produce the lion's share of our food? When we start talking about getting rid of undocumented immigrants, getting rid of people who are here on humanitarian status, asylum seekers of various sorts, it's estimated that we're talking about more than half of the overall food system. The people who produce meat, dairy, who pick our vegetables and fruit, the people who run feedlots or who drive trucks, the people who stock groceries or who work in the back of restaurants. If suddenly 50% or more of the people who are involved in every step of the supply chain for our food production, if they're suddenly gone, how are we going to feed ourselves?
I think that's the real takeaway, right? The short-sightedness and the cruelty of what we're describing here. I think I'm going to call it a day there. We've learned a lot about the story. I just want to let the audience out there know that you can find the podcast on Reapso or on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts, your favorite podcast app, which I think is the new way of saying this. You can also read the text article that we did in partnership with Mother Jones. It's on our website. And if you want to learn more about FERN's dispatches from the front lines of food, farming, and the environment, come to Reapso. And if you'd like to donate to help support our work, come to our website at www.thefern.org. I think that's all I've got to say for today. Ted, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on. This is great to have this conversation.